right.
Well, Ellen Kennedy, thank you and welcome to the project of telling our sister story. Now, one thing we like to also begin with, besides Ellen Kennedy, is who you were, and that was Esther Francis,
You're right.
your mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell us more
Yes.
about that later. But anyway, Ellen Kennedy comes to us. She lives right here on campus, and she can tell you the story of how she came from Chicago and all her many ministries and got to Adrian. So Ellen, why don't you begin by sharing the story of where you began, when you were born, your family, your siblings, and what was life like in that Kennedy household, which was one that really held much spirituality when I think of your family. Yes.
Yes.
So floor is yours.
Okay. Well, it's a joy to be here to tell my story
Good.
because I look at my life and just say it's just full of gratitude. And reflecting on so many things to carry me through these years. I was born in St. Margaret of Scotland, parish in Chicago. It was on the south side.
I was just going to say south side and north
Oh
side.
yes, south side, 99th and Vincennes. The church and everything is still working. And I was in, well, let's say there's my brother Frank, Phil, Mary went through St. Margaret of Scotland. And I came along and I was in first grade for just a few months because we moved, which I will share a little bit later. But at the time for moving, we were in a very small house. And we could certainly experience that we needed something bigger. So
Small house with all those people and one bathroom probably.
Probably. But we learned how to give and take.
Good.
And we never had to worry about getting to school or getting to church because it was in walking distance.
Wonderful.
And so in 1931, I came along, October 6, 1931. And I have very little recollection of that time because I was just in first grade. And we moved to St. Lawrence's, which was going from one pastor, Monsignor McGuire, to the other pastor, Monsignor McGuire, at St. Lawrence's. And that's where I met the Adrian Dominicans. And finished first grade. And I often thought, is there going to be anybody else in our family? Or am I it? And then
So you were the oldest.
Frank was the oldest.
Frank.
And Frank and Phil were already moving into high school, and they went to the seminary.
Okay, both of them.
So both of them. So Frank and Phil were really not home a lot because of where they had chosen to go. Phil was around more, but Frank was always there. We didn't have a car, so friends took care of us to get from hither and yon. And so when we moved to St. Lawrence's, Mary was in 7th grade, I do believe, and in I was 31. Esther came along about, she was born in, I'll say 4 years later. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to have a little sister. And that's how our family just grew. And there were 5 of us. But Frank and Phil were really in the seminary, so wasn't around for the girls bringing up. Mary was at Aquinas, which was an Adrian Dominican school. So to put a little cap on all this, We were indoctrinated by Adrian Dominicans. We didn't know any other community.
Mm-hmm.
But after we moved into St. Lawrence's, we were in walking distance to the school, church, every place. And I was in first grade. Phil was in, I think, maybe fourth or fifth. And then Esther was a baby in stroller.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, where do we go from there?
So you went to high school.
Went to high school
Where?
at Aquinas.
Oh, you're at Aquinas.
And again, the Adrian Dominicans. And an interesting thing about going to Aquinas, I hadn't thought too much about it, but we had a musician, Ellen Loretta. And of course, my name was Ellen, and my middle name was Loretta. I don't know if there was a, it was just a joy to think, oh, someone else has my name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, wonderful years during that time. But the interesting thing for me, going to into high school, and the sisters were at the end of, the convent was right there. Dorothy Folliard's family was right next door to the convent. And I don't know, there was just something special about this street that we lived on. We were really the youngest family, and the family, the man and woman that lived across the street, when they heard 5 kids were coming into the block, they weren't too sure if this what this was going to be like. But they soon found out that we weren't so bad.
I suppose because you were indoctrinated by the Adrian Dominicans, you weren't bad, huh?
We weren't bad.
Good kids.
But my years at living there and going to Aquinas, there was always a connection with the sisters.
Okay.
And a few things that I just like to mention with that is Esther and I became, as young as we were, became sacristans for the sisters. When the sisters had anything at the store that they needed, they would call Mom and say, could one of the girls run up to the A&P? We need a few things from the store. So we would run an errand for them. And the other thing is, if they had an appointment over on 71st Street at a doctor's, they would call and say, can one of the girls go with us as our companion? And when I think back at that, a kid
Was the companion.
was the companion. We became quite involved with the sisters because of the, we also helped with the Sunday collection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those were the ways you got involved in the parish, because everyone's known by a parish. They didn't tell
Absolutely.
exactly the geography where they were living, but it was the parish to which you belonged.
Yeah.
But before we get on too far, before you entered, back to your home life.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like in the house? I mean, as far as festivities, as far as how you got along, I'm sure it was perfect.
Well, there was
Your family life.
very definitely family, the true sense of the word. And that is that we, one way to say that, I can remember just one of us said to Mom, oh, can I get a new whatever? And Mother would say, well, this month I'm going to say it's Ellen's turn. Next month you can get it. And that's the way Mother really took care of us.
Very good.
It was teaching us at that age, this is the need right now. So this is what we do. Your turn is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that so clearly with Mom.
So that whole idea of sharing or
Sharing.
having to wait for whatever, and you can't have everything you wanted, but
At the time you wanted it.
many values
Mhm.
you were taught
Oh,
growing up.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Dad, who worked for the Illinois Central
Okay.
Railroad, when the sisters found out or realize that Dad worked for the Illinois Central, which was known as the IC, they would call him for reservations, because in those days that's the way we traveled. We didn't have a lot of cars going around in the community because it was in the late 30s, 40s. And so Dad began getting transportation for the sisters. And
the sisters knew who to call
Oh, they
for
sure
whatever they
did.
wanted, and that was kind of that era at the time,
Was
because
very-
of where we were, and
yeah.
you didn't have your cars, and you didn't have transportation, and all of that. So you were a family that really entered into the life of the sisters in that way.
very much so.
But back to your finishing high school at Aquinas, what was special about going there? Was there some sister that you recall that was inspiration to you?
I just looked upon the sisters at Aquinas as really caring for all of us. I was involved in the musical part of it, in the choral group. And we used to do musicals, and when we needed the male, if it was a play or something we were put on, we would go to Leo High School, which was the boys' high school,
Got it.
which we were located on 72nd Street, and Leo was over on 80,
Whatever.
whatever. And so there was a real mutual sharing of our level of social,
Right.
but at the same time, we did, and when they needed the women or the young girls,
Right.
we would go there. So that was a real learning, when I think about it, is we had to give up something in order to experience something else. And the sisters they allowed all that to happen. And but the music part of it was really a great joy. I love music.
Okay, good.
So when Dad would bring the tickets home, then it was getting them over to Aquinas and Philip Neri and all
the tickets
those
for the train station.
for their travels.
Yeah.
And
Was there one sister in particular that
Oh,
you recall
from
at high
Aquinas.
school? Yeah.
not really, other than the music.
Yeah. Who was the music? Oh, Ellen.
Ellen Loretta.
Uh-huh.
And I just, there was no other sister. I never really, Dad always wanted us to take Latin. I had no desire to take a Latin class. But in those days, Latin was,
We had to take
we had to take it.
Yeah.
But I can't say there was anyone particular that stands out in my mind.
Okay. And then you finished high school. And then did you decide before you finished high school that you
Well-
wanted to be a sister?
Well, during that time of high school, Esther and I became very involved with the collection on Sunday, being a sacristan, going to the store when the sisters would call. There was always that connection. And then I really think the key was in doing the collection, and the sisters would leave us out the back porch. That's where we did the collection. They would go in and do their Compline and First Sunday and
So you were
forth.
counting the money on the back porch of the convent. In a safe neighborhood in Chicago.
In a safe neighborhood
Interesting,
in
okay.
Chicago. And through that, for me, I remember, and Esther she had, I don't know, I just remember being alone on the back porch with the collection. And some of the sisters they were not really secure with that. They're in doing their prayers, and I'm on the back porch with the collection. So what they did, they moved me up to the attic. And that's when we really finished it. But the key of this was, I remember so clearly the sisters coming to me and say, Ellen, would you like to come in and pray with us?
Oh, okay.
And I said, yes, I would. So I would go in for their first Sunday or go in for their vesper or whatever was going on. And I really do believe going into the convent, going through that hallway, the kitchen, their dining room, the chapel, there was something of a welcoming. And I really feel that was a key.
Did one of the sisters ask you, did they say, would you like to be a sister?
I don't remember that
Okay.
question ever said to
Okay.
me.
How soon after high school did you enter?
I graduated in 1950 and I entered that June,
You entered right after
right
high-
after that.
Yeah, okay.
And the sisters at Lawrence's were really key to me, knowing what it meant to be alert, to be available, be willing to help someone else. And that was done just by their very gesture of really taking care of me.
But where did that deep down come from, first of all?
It came from my family.
Your family, yes. You had
Absolutely.
the spirituality of your family and your mom and dad, and yes, and then it was reinforced with the sisters. So then you entered, and how many entered at the time you did? Roundabout.
When we entered, from Aquinas, I don't recall, but for entering here, there were about 82 of us.
Oh, back then it was a large group.
It was a
okay.
very large group. But some say to me, well, Father Cannelli really got you in here, and I said, no. It started in my family.
Right, yeah.
And I think that my brothers Frank and Phil, unknowingly, even with myself, when I could see their commitment to want to be in ministry for others, and what my dad did, other than sitting in the office taking care of complaints and the rest of it, his reaching out to the sisters' needs. Dad was a very good relational person, and Mom was the same way.
Your sister, not Esther.
Mary.
Mary. She was in a workshop we did about,
Oh, yeah.
years ago. But here, everyone's in religious life. How did she feel? She found someone and got married, right?
That's right. In fact, I entered in 1950, and Mary got married that October. And I remember having conversation with Mary in regards to my entering and not being there for her wedding. And I can remember so clearly Mary saying, Ellen, we're at this point in our life that there's a readiness for you to do this, and here it is for me, and we're okay with it. We had a very good conversation, and there again, it's the reaching out to somebody else's concerns and having conversation about it.
Well, that's good. And you've all been close, very close,
Oh, very
since
close.
then. Now you were in the novitiate.
Mhm.
You had that part of formation, and then you were sent out. You've been to many places. We don't have the time to go through all the many places you've been to. Michigan and Des Moines, and most of the time in Illinois. Right?
Most of the time I was in Canada
Canada
for 6
yes.
years.
Now, as you look at all of those, it's hard to pick out one because there's something that happened to each of us in those missions that we were on, both inside and outside. So, as you recall, is there one in particular that influenced you?
Well, when I entered, I knew I was entering to be a teacher.
Oh, you did.
I knew that from the beginning.
I didn't know what I thought I'd be. I just I entered.
Well, the reason why I say that is because I know I'm drifting back into,
No, that's
but when I was a kid in school at St. Lawrence's, Sister Mary Sheila, a second grade teacher, for some unknown reason, we got to know the sisters, but she approached me and she said, Ellen, would you be interested in coming down to my room after school before you go home and help me prepare my lessons for the next day, pulling out the flashcards I need for vocabulary. She enumerated all the things. She said, I could really use some help. And I said, oh, I'd love to do it. So I would go down to Mary Sheila if there was any sister, Mary Sheila Clancy.
She was a tad Irish. All right, so she was a big influence in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or has been.
From grade school.
Right, right.
And yeah, she really would. And there again, it was and when I would see Mary Sheila with her children out in the playground or wherever, there was just such, she was teacher, but there was a gentleness about her particular presence with us. And I really say Mary Sheila and being connected with the sisters in the convent, more so than Mary or anyone else. And that's not minimizing their involvement, because we never, I cannot think of anything that came out as to why are you doing that, or, questioning from my brothers and sisters.
Okay, but all the various missions you've been on,
Okay.
everything is not perfect.
No, it isn't.
And without disclosing names, is it, how do you approach challenge? Have you ever felt challenged deeply in your life?
Well, one of the things would have been when I got my assignment to go to Bishop Quarter.
Okay, so that was different.
And,
And Bishop Quarter was a boarding school for boys.
Was a boarding school for boys, and I didn't think I belonged there.
Yeah, okay.
And I questioned it.
Okay, well, that's good.
And I was I had been doing summer school,
Uh-huh.
and I can remember, I don't recall the leadership that brought the cards to it. That's in material. But I had a strange look on my face, and she said to me, because my name then was Esther Francis.
That's right. We skipped over that. You got named, or you chose the name of your mom and dad.
Mom and dad.
Esther and Francis, okay.
And she said to me, is there something wrong? And I said, yes, I think there's been a mistake.
Okay, good, you spoke up. Wonderful.
And when I think about it, I think, oh my gosh, at that time, you just didn't question anything.
Well, that was good.
But I did. I said, I'm going to Bishop Quarter Military School. And she said, there's no mistake. That's where you're going. And I was there for 3 years.
Okay.
And I loved it.
What did you learn about yourself through that whole experience?
I learned that I could adjust because it was different. I lived there with the boys in an alcove on the floor. And the things that I really had to handle, to speak up when something was an injustice, I found myself doing that.
Good. You started with yourself with the appointment.
At that point. And in fact, one of the cadets just died 2 years ago that kept in touch with me.
Wonderful, wonderful. See, we don't know the influence we've had.
No, you don't. And one of the things and it wasn't a criticism from a cadet, but the principal always made the rounds in the morning to say hello to the kids. And they all stood and greeted the principal. And I turned to the group and I said, you can sit down now. And they didn't move. And I thought,
Military.
this is strange. And
You're a woman.
one of the cadets came up to me and said, Sister, as you were.
Oh.
So I said, okay, my first lesson in military language, as you were. And they all sat down. And I laugh every time I think of that.
As you were, as you were. Okay, we're not,
So then another one was going to Canada.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, we're closing in on it's only 30 minutes to tell your life story. But, so that was an experience. Can you just briefly tell us how you got there and how that influenced your life?
There was a request from the community.
Right.
That came in from many bishops, but one was Bishop Sylvan Lavoie, and he sent a letter out to many communities, and we responded.
Right.
So the letter came out to us. I was retired at that time, and I said, and Sue Gardner
Okay.
is who I was living with,
Okay.
and she was in this particular ministry. I was free as a lark, and we came and got the presentation, went back home. We were living in Palatine.
Uh-huh.
I was free, and I said, why not?
Right.
And she was still working, and I said, we talked about it, and I said, and I will go.
Wonderful.
And I felt in many ways I was going into foreign land because I'd never been out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an experience.
Just like going to a boys' military school was an experience. Keep yourself open. Yeah.
You're right. So I really feel, basically for me in my life, I've had many opportunities. And one of the basic ones that I have learned is the relationship, how
Right.
important that
Right.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Being related to the ministry to the best I can be, to what I am doing at that point, as well as with the sisters that I'm living with or in community
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere.
Ellen,
Then-
what do you do for fun? Now you're here. You're here
I'm
living
here.
on campus. You're retired again. See, you know we don't ever retire. But
No, we don't.
no, you keep engaged in life.
Yeah. Well, what I really surprisingly learned, and I never thought I would, Sue is a great camper.
Oh, so you went camping.
And so I said to her, she wanted to go camping. I says, okay, I'll go. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I just thought, it's an
Good.
adventure.
Good. Wonderful.
And we spent many years, we had everything we needed, and Sue was a good one for watching sales. So what we needed, we would get. And I learned to love camping.
So what exactly did you do briefly in Canada,
In Canada,
the mission that you were on?
yeah, okay,
Briefly.
briefly. We were asked to help the people experience some newness of spirituality.
Okay. Okay.
They only had 2 people who could lead them in prayer, what we would call communion service.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed some updating. So that's really
Good.
what we did, but we didn't have a plan. We worked with what we had.
Wonderful. And you had lots, years and years.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up having 6 people who could call the people to prayer.
Wonderful.
Because up in Canada, we didn't have Mass every day. We didn't have Mass
Where
every
in
Sunday.
Canada? Mention it briefly.
Well,
people, just
Well, we were in the middle of Canada. It's hard to really describe it because we weren't to the west and we weren't to the east. We were in the middle, called Nelson House. And there's only one road, if you look at a map.
Was there a county or a
It was just
just-
it was a reservation,
reservation?
a
Okay.
native made.
Okay.
And because of Sue's background, she certainly
Has done.
came with more than I did, but I
Yeah.
learned.
Yeah. You came.
And it was one of the most wonderful experiences because we were just out
That's great.
on our own.
That's great.
And talk about a challenge.
Right, and you just have to keep yourself open for the next challenge because these just seem to happen to you once, you know. Now, we're going to have to round up. Is there anything that you didn't say? I mean, there's lots you didn't say. You
I-
kept saying briefly that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, basically, I've had a life of the word that keeps coming to me of gratitude.
Good.
The people that have been in my life that have took me by the hand and just said, Ellen, how about this?
Mm-hmm.
And then when we had to change our names, you know, we had that option.
Back to who you were.
You know, Esther and I looked at one another and said, okay, if we're going to do this, we both have to do it because we've got each other's names. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And our relationship being in the community has just been a gift for the two of
That's
us.
a blessing for sure.
It is. And there's just so much.
You mentioned at the beginning that you had to end our time. You had something you wanted to read?
Yes. And it's on the, it kind of sums up for me.
It's not a whole page, is it?
No, it's not.
Is it in
I
here?
did.
Is it in here?
I think it's. Oh dear. One of the things really also, I can just say it briefly, I had a retreat with Angela Sarens
Right,
out in Sedona.
right.
That was an experience. And because I learned for myself that I could handle camping, not that we camped at the
No.
retreat, but we were really in the wilderness.
Oh my God, it's
And I had to
magnificent.
take a flight into a land that I had no idea where I was. It was a town called Goodyear, and I was supposed to meet a driver that I did not know. And I just went and followed my directions. And when I got in the car, I was sitting in the back seat of the cab driver, and he must have felt some kind of uncertainty with me. And he says, "I hope you're okay back there." He said, "I do know where I'm going." And he said, "I'll get you there safely." Oh, and that's what we did. I
That's
mean,
good.
talk about and just going with the with the
whatever.
moment.
Yes.
And I also feel that being an Irish family might have had something to do with our culture and how we grew up with that gift of giving, receiving,
Right.
and Mom and Dad were so key with that.
Well, I feel we've met your mother and father through the experience we just had, and I thank you. I know I kind of rushed you through this, but
Oh,
you know
you
we can
didn't.
always do a part 2, and I know you'd love to do this again or continue it. But anyway, Miss Ellen, this has been long in the making, and no comment. And I just want to thank you. As we said coming in, we've gotten to know each other a little bit more than when I first tapped you on the shoulder
Absolutely.
and said, how about, usually people just see me and they walk the other way. But thank you. And we may have to edit some of this.
Okay.
You know, but I do want to thank you. I know this, preparing this, it's who you are. And it's evident that
absolutely.
you are,
And for
you know.
me, in my life right now, I am in the perfect
Good.
place.
Good.
I came on my own. And that is a gift to me.
Right.
And I'm so grateful that people along my life have been there to help me through some of these things.
And you are a gift to us. You are a
Thank you.
gift to the Adrian
Thank you.
Dominicans in many ways, in the small ways and the big ways. And we thank our dear God for Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy.
Absolutely.
Yes, and thank you for sharing this time with us.